start off with a little story. In 1943, during the Second World War, a Spanish fisherman pulled a corpse out of the sea off Spain. And this corpse was in a Royal Navy uniform. And chained to his arm was a briefcase full of top secret documents. Now, the fisherman carted the corpse off to the Spanish authorities. And the Spanish at the time were in league with the Nazis. So they passed it over to the Nazis. They were allied with them. And when the Nazis opened the briefcase, there were some secret papers in there telling them that the Allies, Britain, America, Russia, were going to invade Greece. All right? And so the Nazis thought, we've got these top secret documents. The Allies are invading Greece. This is great. But of course, it was all one big ruse. The Nazis fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. They fortified Greece. They sent all their armour and all their tanks and all their planes to Greece. And they left Sicily relatively unguarded. And of course, then the Allies invaded Sicily, went up Italy, and went on to win the war. They made a film out of it, The Man Who Never Was. Now, the Nazis, they thought they'd figured out who this guy was, this dead bloke. Did he work for the British? Well, yes. Was he part of a top secret mission? Yes. Were these top secret papers? Yes. But they were completely blind to this man's true identity. Turns out the guy they actually used was just a nobody off the street. He was a tramp who died, and they got him, and they dressed him up in a British uniform. They had no idea how significant this man was. They had no idea of the true nature of his purpose. The Nazis had some facts in front of them, but they only saw what they wanted to see. They got the news they wanted, and it cost them dearly. Well, why tell this story, you wonder? Well, the first half of Mark's gospel is made up of events to show us who Jesus is. Mark's writing to show the New Testament Christians, the early church, this is the man we follow. This is him. So Mark's reminded us of some amazing things so far. We've seen Jesus healing people, haven't we? The blind see, the lame walk. Demons have been cast out of people. And there were great miracles. Remember, he fed 5,000 people on Jewish territory. Then he fed 4,000 people in Gentile territory. We've seen a dead girl brought back to life. A lame man forgiven for his sins. We've even seen the King walk on water. And we've heard God the Father say when he got baptized, "This is my beloved Son, with him I'm well pleased." We've learned that Jesus is the King God promised. The King God promised in the Old Testament through the prophets. And the last few weeks we've seen Jesus going to the Gentiles and saving them. He is the King of the world. And this is mind-blowing stuff. And as the people of the day see all this unfold, what do they think of Jesus? Well, it's clear that by and large, the majority of them are getting Jesus all wrong, like the man who wasn't there. They're seeing what they want to see. That's the title of our sermon, Getting the King all wrong. So take the crowds in chapter 1, verse 27. The common folk, they are amazed by Jesus' teaching and his miracles. So that looks good, doesn't it? The local people, they're thinking, yeah, he's great. But in chapter 3, the scribes, those are the political elites, they're from Jerusalem, and they label Jesus a sorcerer. They claim that Jesus can cast out demons because he's the king of demons. He is Beelzebub. And then you've got his hometown crowd at Nazareth. When Jesus goes home and preaches to his friends at Nazareth, well, they reject him. They try and throw him off a cliff. Finally, we've got his disciples. Up to this point, they just seem very confused, don't they? We saw last time in verse 14 to 19 of Mark 8 that the disciples were in danger of swallowing the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. The Pharisees had a picture in their mind of what the Messiah, what their king should look like. But their big problem was that this man in front of them didn't match the king they had in their heads. Herod, on the other hand, he really enjoyed listening to John the Baptist, didn't he? He enjoyed listening to God's word. He enjoyed listening to sermons. But when push came to shove, he wouldn't act on what he heard. He silenced the voice of God in his life. He cut off John's head. And Jesus has warned the disciples, look, you guys are in danger of doing the same thing. You're in danger of getting the king all wrong. So we've got 4 points this morning and a couple of lessons to end with. So point number 1, seeing things all wrong. There it is. Verse 22 through to 26. Now, verse 22 to 26, we've got a weird miracle. It's peculiar. It's unique amongst Jesus' miracles because at first it kind of looks like it don't work. Jesus is in a place called Bethsaida, a village by the Sea of Galilee, by a big lake, right? And a blind man comes to him and he asks Jesus to heal him. So verse 23, Jesus takes him aside and he places spit on his eyes. Now, he probably just licked his fingers and touched the blind man so he knew that Jesus was there. End of verse 23 says, do you see anything? Verse 24, he looked up and said, I see people, but they look like trees walking. So this man is seeing things all wrong, isn't he? Jesus has given him some of his sight back, but he can't make out what he's seeing. He can't make out the faces and the features of the people walking past. They just look like brown blurs. They look like trees, he says. Verse 25, Jesus has a second go. Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, look, don't go back through the village, just go home. So you've got to ask yourself, what is going on here? Has Jesus lost some of his power? Is it like when your phone's only on 10% and Jesus can't get there? He needs to recharge. Well, no, Jesus does this miracle to show the disciples their spiritual disability. Just like this man, his disciples are only partially sighted. They had only partially understood who Jesus was. They're pretty sure he's the king, the Messiah. But at the moment, they're not seeing him clearly. They're like the Pharisees. They've got a picture in their minds of how the Messiah should look and act and conduct himself. But it's the wrong picture. See, the blind man was seeing people, but he was describing them as trees. And as the disciples see Jesus, well, they desperately want a victorious and powerful king. A Messiah who was going to rid them of the Romans and free them from oppression. But instead, they were going to see with their own eyes a suffering servant, a king who would face the ultimate oppression of death on a cross. So Mark includes this strange miracle to show us the spiritual state of the disciples. He's painting a picture. He's saying this is what the disciples are like. And just like Jesus needs to intervene with this blind man to make him fully see, he's going to have to intervene with the disciples too. Verse 27, Jesus went out with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way, he asked his disciples, who do people say that I am? Jesus knows that people were getting him all wrong, right? And now he asks, well, what are they saying then? What suggestions are they giving? Verse 28, they told him, some say you're John the Baptist. Do you remember when King Herod heard about Jesus in chapter 6? He thought John the Baptist must have risen from the dead. That was what he reasoned. And it wasn't just Herod saying this. This was a rumour that had spread throughout Israel. God, this holy man who they killed, he's come back. Second suggestion, others say Elijah. Some people reckon you are the old prophet from the Old Testament, Elijah. And Elijah's return now. They'd obviously been reading Malachi in their quiet times, who 450 years earlier had prophesied that before the great and awesome day of the Lord arrived, God would send to them Elijah. Perhaps that's who Jesus really is. He's Elijah who comes before the end of the world. And others just say, well, I don't know, you're one of the prophets. All of these suggestions prove that people knew Jesus was different. They thought highly of him, didn't they? But of course, they were all wrong. Verse 29, Jesus asked them straight, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." Or in other words, you are the king. You're the king God promised. And at last we think, yes, Peter, his eyes have been opened, haven't they? He's gone from being blind to being able to see. Jesus is none other than the long-awaited promised king of Israel. These other suggestions, John the Baptist, Elijah, the prophets, they're all good suggestions. One of them's partially right. The general population had grasped some of the truth of who God was, of who Jesus was, but Peter is even closer to the truth. Peter has realized that he is in the presence of royalty. Like the blind man, though, in Bethsaida, Peter's eyes have only been partially opened. Okay, first question I'll ask you this morning then is, what do you make of Jesus? As we've read through Mark, you've heard some amazing accounts, haven't you? I wonder, what is your verdict on this man Jesus? Who do you say that Jesus is? A famous writer, C.S. Lewis, gives us three options. He said when it comes to Jesus, there's only three options. He's either a liar, a lunatic, or he's Lord. So option number one, Jesus was a liar. Maybe he knew he wasn't special and he was simply a con man. So all the miracles he does, they're merely parlour tricks. You see people doing so-called miracles today, don't you? Darren Brown, you see him, he does some amazing things. But it's a parlour trick. It's a con. Sleight of hand, manipulation. Maybe that's what Jesus was doing. Maybe his sermons were merely the slick-tongued words of a confidence trickster. Maybe that's what you think Jesus was. He was a liar. Second option, he was a lunatic. He believed he was special, but he wasn't really. That would make him dangerously mad, wouldn't it? Because what type of lunatic claims that they are the son of gods? What type of mentally deranged person believes that they're going to die and come back to life? The third option, though, is that Jesus is Lord. He is king. He was who he said he was. God in the flesh. The king, the conqueror of sin and Satan and death itself. Those are your three options, only three options. Who do you say that Jesus is? Don't misunderstand who Jesus is, because getting him wrong is the most fatal mistake a human being can make. If you misunderstand who Christ is, if you don't get why he came, then it will have severe and eternal consequences for you. Okay, second point then, seeing what he wants to see. Verse 30 to 33. So Peter has given a great answer to Jesus' true identity. He says, yeah, you are the Christ, you are the King. But look what happens next. Look at verse 31. Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he said this plainly, or he said it clearly. Now, this is the last thing that Peter expected to hear. And when Christ's words sink in, well, so does Peter's heart. See, an ancient Jew like Peter would have no concept that the Messiah would have to suffer and die. The Messiah was supposed to be the one who delivered Israel from her enemies. The Messiah was meant to be the one who would raise an army, rise up, destroy the Romans. Perhaps Jesus wouldn't even need an army. I mean, they've already seen him doing miracles. And maybe they think, well, like Elijah in the Old Testament, he's simply going to call fire down from heaven. He's going to call an army of angels and they're going to turn up and just roast the Roman soldiers. They're just going to melt like in Indiana Jones or something. Perhaps Jesus will call a great plague on his enemies. But whatever's going on, Jesus can't suffer and die, no. He's going to restore the nation to its former glory. If the disciples were around today, they'd be wearing MIGA hats, wouldn't they? Make Israel great again. But now Jesus is telling them that instead, no, the Jewish leaders and the religious establishment are going to reject him and have him killed. And for Peter, it just does not compute. Computer says no. Look at the last bit of verse 32. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. That is, tell him off. He says, don't you realise, Jesus, that's not what the Messiah does. That's not how the Messiah gets treated. You've got it wrong. You cannot say this sort of thing. You cannot say you're going to die and suffer. No. Like the blind man from Bethsaida, Peter's eyes have only been partially opened, haven't they? He's recognised that Jesus is the Christ, the King. He thinks he's got him all figured out, but in reality, he's got no idea of God's overarching salvation plan. Verse 33. But turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." Now, ain't that a bit harsh? Jesus saying to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." He's calling him Satan. Couldn't he have just pushed back a little more gently? He said, "Now, Peter, brother, come on, settle down." Well, no. Remember God's first son, Adam. Why had Adam failed to reign as king? Well, he'd given in to temptation, hadn't he? He'd given in to Satan, the devil. The snake had said, "Look, don't serve God, Adam, serve yourself." And Adam did serve himself, and he fell. And how had all the former messiahs of Israel, the former kings of Israel, done? Well, they'd all messed up too. Instead of serving God and trusting him totally, they trusted themselves. David went after Bathsheba. Solomon went after 1,000 women and after horses and chariots and riches. And the rest of the messiahs were all wicked. They went after idols. They all succumbed to the temptations of Satan. And now Satan's words are coming out of Peter's mouth. Satan says there's no need to follow the Father. There's no need to listen to his commands. Peter says there's no need for you to die. Do what's going to suit you, Jesus. Jesus tells Peter, "Look, I don't follow you. You follow me. So get behind me. And stop pushing Satan's words out. Get behind me, Satan. Stop pursuing the empty ambitions of men and set your mind on God's." And notice the first line of verse 33. But turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter. If Jesus hearkens to the voice of Satan, his friends, his disciples who he sees over in the distance, well, they're going to be lost, aren't they? Eternally lost. But the good shepherd sees his sheep and he's determined to save them. His love for others far outweighs his love for himself. Greater love has no man than that he should lay down his life for his friends. Okay, the question we've got to ask ourselves this morning, though, is, are we getting Jesus all wrong? Have we misunderstood who Jesus is? I wonder, what misconceptions do you have about Christ that he himself, if he was here, would have to correct in you? Perhaps it's the idea that a lot of people have that Jesus is going to sort out all of my problems. So I'll scratch his back, he'll scratch mine. Maybe it's the notion that Jesus doesn't want you to have any problems whatsoever. Maybe you think that Jesus gives you that little extra boost you need to get to heaven. So Jesus has done most of the work, half the work, but you've got to do the other half. Jesus provides you with the boost you need to make you acceptable to God. He smooths over the cracks of your sinful life. Maybe you carry the misconception that as long as you've made a profession of faith at one point in your life, it doesn't really matter how you live. Holiness is optional. So, I say I'm a Christian back in 1987. I don't go to church anymore. I go once or twice at Christmas. But Jesus is happy with me. He's happy for me just to carry on in the world doing what I usually do. Christian friend, do you see how easy it is to get Jesus all wrong? I suppose the question is, why are so many people in churches getting the king so wrong? Well, for some, it's genuinely a case of bad teaching. There are wolves who wish to control and manipulate God's people. The prosperity gospel seeks to fleece people of their money, doesn't it? There are whole denominations of churches and cults who have for centuries been deliberately misleading the people, teaching lies about Jesus, about his character and his nature. Bad shepherds who feed their flocks half-truths. But aside from those, why else do people get Jesus so terribly wrong? Why is it that even when confronted with the truth of God's word, people still won't accept Jesus as he is? Well, the simple truth is that for most people, they do not want to accept the real Jesus. Satan has blinded them to the truth. Like Peter, they look at Jesus and they simply see what they want to see. Muslims see just another prophet. Hindus see another idol they can whack on their mantelpiece. Catholics see him as the first step on the stairway to heaven. Jehovah's Witnesses see a God, but not the gods, and so on and so forth. Christian friend, we have to make sure that we've not projected our personality onto the Lord's. Got to make sure we haven't projected our own political views, our own personal preferences onto Jesus. We don't get to shape him, he shapes us. And the way he's going to shape us is as we prayerfully study his words and now allow the Holy Spirit to rule in our lives. Okay, third point, seeing the full picture. So, after a chapter where people left, right and centre have been seeing the king all wrong, he's now going to give it to the people straight. Verse 34, he said, calling the crowd to him with his disciples. So at this point, Jesus has still got a big crowd and they're kind of in the distance. So he calls them all to him. Now remember, some of these people, they want to be healed. Some of them want a meal. They want to be fed. Some had turned up simply to hear a good story. Jesus has told stories in the past. People like a good story, don't they? They want to hear a skilled orator give a speech. And no doubt some people just wanted to see a bit of action. There was no TV in those days. Where else are you going to go? Perhaps the scribes would turn up, they thought, and cause a bit of an argument. The Romans might even try and arrest him today. So in verse 34 to 38, Jesus tells them exactly what it means to truly follow him. Look what he says. He said to them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Now, this statement would have blown the minds of the disciples. It would have blown the minds of his first hearers. He says, following him, following Jesus, is going to put you on a collision course with the Roman authorities. And the bottom line is, if you follow Jesus, it's going to end in crucifixion. Crucifixion, a death of shame and intense pain. Executed publicly. People who were executed, who were crucified naked, humiliated. This was the method of execution reserved for slaves and the worst of criminals. And Jesus says, this is where following me is going to get you. And think about it, this is a world away from the notion that if I become a Christian, Jesus wipes all of my problems away. You hear a lot of people talk like that, don't you? If I name a thing I want, if I manifest my success, Jesus is going to give it to me. And the doors of heaven are going to be flung open and blessings will flow down. Jesus tells us the exact opposite is true. Following him means a life of pain and shame. Verse 35, for whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. Jesus asked the crowd, are you going to submit to yourselves or are you going to submit to God? Are you going to have your rule and authority or are you going to submit to God's rule and authority? Are you going to seek to save your own life? Are you going to serve yourself or serve God? And it's exactly the same choice that Adam and Eve had in the garden, isn't it? Will you make yourself king or will you allow God to be your king? And look at verse 36. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple Computers, the guy who makes your phones, he was the brains not only of Apple, but he was the brains behind Pixar animation studios. He had assets worth $10.2 billion. There was no car he couldn't buy. There was no property he couldn't afford. He had everything. But despite all of his money, Steve Jobs could not avoid the inevitable, could he? And in October 2011, he sadly died of pancreatic cancer. Steve Jobs could not take 1 cent or even one microchip into the afterlife. And sadly, he died without knowing Jesus. He died a Buddhist. He gained the whole world, but he lost his soul. His wife, Lawrence Jobs, is now worth $14.7 billion, nearly twice as much as her late husband. But the question is, so what? What profit is there in being filthy rich for 30 to 40 years, but then spending an eternity isolated from the very basics of human happiness and losing your soul to the terror and darkness of hell? You cannot carry one diamond necklace or Gucci dress into the afterlife. Your wealth, your intelligence, your assets will not stop your body from one day being lowered into the grave. Verse 37, Jesus says, for what can a man give in return for his soul? Ask Diego Jota that this week. The simple question has a simple answer. Nothing. There's nothing more valuable or more important than your soul. Because your soul is eternal. And therefore there is nothing in this life that is not worth sacrificing for the next life. No car, no watch, no holiday, no experience comes close to what Jesus offers his people. Why would you prioritize this world when Jesus offers you something far better? Jesus tells us that our eternal destination is tied up in him. Verse 38, for whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with his holy angels. Do you notice what Peter failed to mention in verse 31? He omitted something crucial. Because, the idea of the king being crucified was shocking and horrific. But Peter completely misses the fact that Jesus says he's going to rise from the dead. The king is going to overcome the ultimate enemy, death. So instead of Jesus' body rotting in a tomb, God the Father's going to glorify him. He's going to elevate him. He's going to reveal to everyone that he's not just the king of a small Middle Eastern country called Israel. No, he's the king of the universe. God himself in bodily form. And one day Jesus is going to usher in a new era, isn't he? An era where his glory will be unveiled to the whole world. Verse 9, he said to them, truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God has come with power. We'll see next week that Jesus is going to give 3 of his disciples a glimpse of the glory that's to come. The glory that awaits each and every one of us who's a Christian. They will see Jesus' face shine like the sun. Jesus' message to his followers is simple. To truly follow him means you have to loosen your grip on the things of this world. You have to stop thinking that this world is all there is. You have to stop allowing the treasures of this world to direct the choices you make. Instead, Jesus calls his true disciples to let go of the world and completely submit themselves to his reign. Even, Jesus says, if that means being executed. Because if you're not willing to do that, Jesus says, if you're ashamed of me, well, I'll be ashamed of you when I return. And you will not find a place in my kingdom. Well, to close in, I think it's really, really challenging to apply a passage like this in our day and age, isn't it? It's really hard to do it without making everyone just feel rubbish, or without making people question their own salvation. Because our issue in London in 2025 is that we're not confronted with this harsh choice, are we? I doubt members of Lewisham Council are going to kick your door in, stick a gun to your head and say, make your choice, Jesus or Lewisham. Your life or Jesus, right? They're not going to do that. So what does taking up your cross look like for 21st century Christians? Well, many answers, but I'll give you two simple ones to get on with this week. Number one, taking up your cross means having a loose grip on the treasures of this world. In 2020, you'll probably remember something called the coronavirus, won't you? It caused havoc. That era taught us a lot of things, but one thing it taught me was just how flimsy the stuff of this world was. The riches men trust in are a complete joke, aren't they? Look at what God can do to the riches of football clubs. During COVID, God said, I'm going to take your football clubs away. No more football. I'll end up having you playing behind closed doors with artificial crowd noise. Liverpool will win the league, but no one will care. Look at the economies of this world, the so-called superpowers. In 1 week in February in 2020, the global stock market lost $6 trillion. I can't even begin to imagine what that figure means. And I could mention a dozen more examples. Did you see God illustrating the stupidity of investing too heavily in this world? He can click his fingers and take it all away. What will it profit you if you gain all this stuff? Because it's just so fleeting. It's so unreliable. It will not last. So, Christian friend, enjoy the assets God has given you. If he's blessed you with a big house, a nice garden, a nice car, don't feel guilty. Enjoy it. Enjoy them. Whack on the aircon. Enjoy the leather seats. Drive around to the glory of God. Praise his name that he's given you some blessings. But use what he's given you to serve him. Don't make the treasures of this life your ultimate goal. Don't allow every choice and every decision to be shaped by the pursuit of the riches of this world. Because this world is fading. Its glory is passing. One day it's going to melt. Jesus says, if you do that, you'll lose your life. If your happiness and joy is centered in the rotten material things of this doomed earth, Jesus says you'll be doomed. Secondly, finally, taking up your cross means you're ready and willing to deny yourself. Taking up your cross means that you're ready to deny yourself that promotion if it's going to get in the way of your service to God. Taking up your cross means that you might deny buying yourself that new car and instead give your money to a struggling family at church or a struggling family you know. Following Jesus means denying yourself popularity at school, at college, in the office. Making a stand for Christ no matter the cost. So I don't get involved in the office gossip or the dirty jokes. Denying yourself means that you don't sleep with your boyfriend or girlfriend until you're actually married, because God's commands mean something. Husbands, it means you deny yourself. It means you're willing to love your wife to the point of death. You don't sit with your feet up as she does all the work. Wives, denying yourself means respecting your husband. Forgiving him when he makes stupid mistakes means you don't run him down behind his back. Do you see, Christian friends, simply claiming Jesus is your Messiah means nothing on its own. Millions of people around the world can make that claim. Are you ready to deny yourself and take up your cross and follow him? Have we recognized the Jesus in front of us? Or have we simply seen what we want to see? Final question, is Jesus worth following? Is Jesus worth it? Well, started with a story, we'll end with a story. Story about a guy called Jim Elliot. Jim Elliot was an American missionary, and he went to share the gospel with the Quechua Indians in Ecuador, Central America. And one particular tribe were extremely violent and hostile to outsiders. And Jim Elliot was well aware that to go to this tribe and try and give them the gospel meant that he may not return. They might just kill him. But he was willing to deny himself. He was willing to take up his cross and follow his Saviour even to the point of death. And that's exactly what happened. In 1954, the Harani tribe turned on Jim's group of missionaries and killed them all. But listen to the famous words of Jim Elliot, which he'd written 5 years earlier in his diary. When someone had asked him, Jim, is it worth it? Is it worth what you're doing? Are you willing to sacrifice yourself for Jesus' kingdom? He said this: he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. See, Jim Elliot had seen Jesus as he really was. He'd seen him with the eye of faith. He'd seen the glory that awaited him at Jesus' return. So he held loosely to the treasures of this world, and he took up his cross, certain that one day he'd receive a crown. Friends, have you realized that glory awaits you? Open your eyes and see who Jesus really is. Take up your cross, deny yourself, and follow him.